Welcome to the Priest cards in Showdown in the Badlands. Really interesting set of cards we have here. Let's go ahead and start with one of the themes of the set. That theme is spells which cast and then give you another one-cost spell with the leftover part of the spell. So we got Holy Spring Water, a 2-mana holy spell. Restore 8 health to a damaged character. Save any excess in a 1-cost bottle. The 1-cost bottle says restore the excess health to a damaged character. There's a bit of clarification that I think you can actually use the Holy Spring Water on a non-damaged character. Might have gotten changed last second, so to say. Because I saw that there was mention that you could perhaps use this on a full health hero so that you could store the spell in a 1-cost spell later. Also, importantly, this does actually trigger Overheal. If you're healing a 3/3 that has 4 damage dealt to it, then you'll heal it for 4, and if it were to have an Overheal, the Overheal would trigger, and you would get a bottled spring water with the remaining 4 excess health. So that's pretty cool. Definitely a good card with Overheal related cards, but hard to imagine that an Overheal deck will finally come to work just because of Holy Spring Water. Is a good card. Great card for Overheal. Great card especially with the Heartthrob legendary, since you can summon a 8-cost card with the Holy Spring Water, but doubtful that this is good enough to make that deck good. Here's that 3-cost card, the 3/3 that I was hinting at. Injured Howler. 3 mana, 3/7. Battlecry, deal 4 damage to this minion, making it come into play as a 3/3. Overheal, deal 2 damage to all enemy minions. So it's a card that you'd put into an Overheal deck if an Overheal deck were good. Card seems questionable, even in an Overheal deck, though. Just doesn't seem quite good enough. Not a big enough upside. But anyways, let's take a look at the bottle spells. You got Invasive Shadeleaf. 4 mana shadow spell. Deal 8 damage to an enemy minion. Save any excess in a 1-cost bottle, effectively making this a 5-cost spell, which can kill 2 medium-sized minions over time. 4 mana for a removal spell, which isn't hard removal. I mean, 8 damage is pretty hard, but it's not like... It's not super hard. It's not the hardest. When you compare it with Cannibalize and the light, it burns! Invasive Shadeleaf looks like just a little too extra. Priests don't need this at that moment. Very unusual final card in this cycle. Swarm of Light Bugs for 5 mana. Summon 10 1/1 Light Bugs with lifesteal. Save any excess in a 1-cost bottle. The bottle is 1 mana. So on empty board, for 5 mana, you get 7 1/1 Light Bugs with lifesteal. And then you get a 1-cost that can summon 3 more Light Bugs. Really weird card for Priest. They don't have board buffs. They're not really looking to summon a bunch of 1/1s. Yeah. Confusing card. Interesting card. But likely terrible. There are some synergies with these cards. The first is the legendary, one of the legendaries. Pip the Potent. 4 mana, 3/5, Battlecry. Copy each 1-cost card in your hand. So synergizes with the bottles. You cast the spells, you get the bottles. The bottles are good spells, great cards for the cost. Use Pip the Potent to get more. Pip the Potent is really good if you copy 2 cost cards, 2 1-cost cards. And the Control Priest currently does have many 1-cost cards. So I think Pip the Potent will be tried. Surprisingly, you might end up putting none of those bottle cards in your deck with Pip the Potent, however. The other card that synergizes with 1-cost cards, Thirsty Drifter, 6 mana, 4/6 taunt, costs 1 less for each 1-cost card you've played this game. This could once again fit the current Control Priest archetype. A lot of 1-cost cards there. a lot of them aren't spells. You got the Armor Vendor, you got the 1/3, which overheals to draw cards. Yeah, you got the Silence. So you already have a good number of one-cost cards. It's possible you'd slide in some of these, one of these bottle cards just to have more targets with Pit the Potent and maybe to put in Thirsty Drifters. Thirsty Drifter seems like a solid card if there were more aggro in the game, so this will probably be a meta call on whether or not you run the Thirsty Drifter, depending on whether or not you need to stop the bleeding. And speaking of meta, the meta is about to shift in favor of Control Priest because a lot of the big endgame stuff that Priest could not deal with, like Control Priest is good at gaining a lot of value over time, but what it can't do is, deal with a swapped deck with Tony, or deal with, what was the other one? Infinite Yogs, played infinitely. Well, now you can beat out more of these decks. There's going to be more aggro decks. Control Priest could be better. And you could see Control Priest even if these cards as a whole aren't great. Because there is one great card here. Benevolent Banker. 3 mana 2/4 battle card, discover a spell from your deck. So that's great. 3 mana 2/4 to just get a good card. That's better than get a good card. It's choose one, better than draw a card because you're discovering a spell. But what's more evil and what's kind of cool about this card is you could quick draw from the enemy deck instead, and it's optional. If you were to top deck this, sometimes you don't want to draw from the enemy deck because they're an aggro deck and you want cards from your deck. So you don't play Benevolent Banker. But sometimes you're up against a combo deck, and playing Benevolent Banker might actually just win you the game because this quick draw, discover a spell from the enemy deck, that draws the card from the enemy deck. That's so delightfully evil. That card could single-handedly change some matchups to make Control Priests win against some combo decks. So, very nice. What else do we have? We have this random Posse Possession, 4 mana Shadow spell. Summon a 4/4 copy of a random minion in your opponent's hand. What is this? 2013? That is actually when Mind Games was printed for Priest. This is a 4 mana spell that was a shadow spell that summoned a random minion from your opponent's deck. It reminds me of Posse Possession, where you're just getting a random 4/4. Sure, sometimes it'll have cool abilities and it'll be a Titan, but sometimes you've paid 4 mana for a 4/4. Wow, that's incredibly bad. You got Trem Heist, 4 mana, get a copy of each card your opponent played last turn. Wow, that's incredibly bad. 4 mana to, draw cards according to what your opponent played. It's so specific, so narrow in what it's trying to do. That's so bad. Wow. And then finally, we have Elise Badlands Savior, which we reviewed at the very beginning of the set reveal. The 8 mana 5/5 legendary, which is the Highlander bonus for Priest. Battlecry, if your deck has no duplicates, summon 4/4 copies of 4 random minions in your deck. After seeing these cards, I can confidently say that Control Priest wants to play their good cards and not play a Highlander deck. So, you're not going to see the Elise deck. Not yet, at least, while Priests have such great cards that you want 2 copies of. So, even though Priest only really gets Benevolent Banker here, that is a really, really good card. And they could try out some cool stuff with Pip and Thirsty Drifter, or it's entirely possible that they won't. The entire bottle mechanic is it's a cool mechanic, but I feel that the cards are a little too weak to actually see play. And then there's some hilariously bad cards in Priest. But all in all, Control Priest could actually see a good amount of play just because of the other changes to the Jailer, to Tony, and to Yogg. It's still a good grind them out class, and Benevolent Banker will allow them to get some wins against some decks that they wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So, cool. Priest. We got one class every single day moving forward, so looking forward to looking at what everyone else gets. So stay tuned. P.S. That last card there is the final neutral card, the neutral legendary of Reno, which could matter for a lot of these Highlander decks. For now, we're just going to assume that the Reno card is ludicrously good, but, you know, without any other reason to go Highlander and Priest, hard to imagine that that would be played in Priest. They have so many cards that you want to have two of.